In a forest, Drasa awakens to the sound of a plane arriving. She quickly readies her weapon, and as soon as a man steps off the plane, she shoots him in the head. Meanwhile, former Marine Levi wakes from a nightmare and decides to clear his mind by spending time at the beach. The next morning, he receives a text instructing him to head to the Marine Corps base. At the base, Levi meets Agent Bartholomew. Aware of his exceptional career as an elite sniper and that he has no family or friends, she offers him a job. In Lithuania, Drasa meets her father at the cemetery to mark the anniversary of her mother's death. Her father, having recently learned that his cancer is untreatable, declares that if he isn't dead by February 14th, he will self-delete so he can finally reunite with his wife on Valentine's Day. In September, Levi wakes up on a plane after being under anesthesia-induced sleep. He asks a soldier about their location, but she isn't authorized to disclose it. She confiscates all his personal belongings and informs him they are approaching a no-fly zone. He must parachute out now and complete the journey to his destination on foot. Levi grabs the assigned bag and jumps, waiting for the right moment to deploy his parachute. He lands safely and begins the arduous trek ahead, which involves climbing, hiking, and camping. Eventually, Levi reaches the edge of a massive gorge. There, he meets Soldier JD, who has been stationed there for a year and also doesn't know their exact location. The two head to the West Tower, which is entirely self-sufficient, equipped with solar energy, a backup generator, a rainwater system, a vegetable garden, and abundant wild game for hunting. On the other side of the gorge stands the East Tower, but contact with its guard is strictly forbidden. The gorge is surrounded by landmines and tactical barriers to the north and south, with no way to cross. As JD continues showing Levi around, he explains the mission. Every day, Levi must patrol the western rim, restocking ammunition in the automatic gun turrets positioned every 600 meters. He must also inspect the containment fence, suspended mines, and cloaking devices, which send false signals to satellites to keep the gorge hidden. A radio check occurs every 30 days, but communication with the outside world is impossible. In case of an emergency, there's a panic button that activates the stray dog protocol, though JD has no idea what it entails and advises Levi to flee if it ever happens. JD explains that this place dates back to the Cold War era, and during that time, military teams from various nations made a pact to keep it a secret, so much so that not even heads of state or presidents are aware of its existence. Levi's mission is simply to ensure that whatever is in the gorge stays there. It sounds absurd, and JD used to think so too until he witnessed something the guards have dubbed the Hollow Men, which can now be heard screeching from within the gorge. JD recounts how, in the late 1940s, 3 battalions on horseback were sent into the gorge to clear it out, but none of them returned. Since then, the military has focused solely on containment. After sharing this information, JD leaves the tower and hikes to the pickup point. A helicopter arrives, lowering a rope to lift him up. A soldier on board asks for his identity. Once JD provides the password, the soldier shoots him in the head and drops his body in the mountains. A month later, Levi has grown accustomed to his monotonous routine. He patrols the perimeter, maintains the security systems, and performs his scheduled radio check-ins. The voice on the other end only asks if everything is fine before hanging up, cutting off any chance for Levi to ask questions. One day, while tending to the garden, Levi notices movement in the other tower. He quickly grabs his binoculars and spots Drasa chopping wood. She notices him too, but chooses to ignore him. One stormy night, Levi wakes up startled from a nightmare and accidentally breaks a glass, making him think he's under attack. Instinctively, he grabs a gun, but when he feels pain in his foot, he realizes he stepped on the shattered glass. It was all just an accident, and he calms down. As he tends to his injured foot, he notices that Drasa is still awake and watching him. However, she retreats to bed once she realizes he's looking back at her. Another month goes by, and Drasa finds herself celebrating her birthday alone. Tired of the isolation and boredom, she fires a shot to get Levi's attention and holds up a sign asking for his name. Levi responds by writing that they're not supposed to communicate. Unfazed, Drasa introduces herself and declares that she'll do as she pleases on her birthday. Amused, Levi replies with his name and raises a glass in a toast. Drasa blasts music loudly and begins dancing, urging Levi to join in. He explains that he's a terrible dancer but an excellent sniper. In response, Drasa shoots his water bottle. Levi quickly grabs his gun and returns the favor by shooting her bottle. Eager to keep the game going, Drasa places another bottle on her head. However, she stops abruptly when she notices movement in the gorge. When Levi looks down, he notices strange creatures, humanoid figures seemingly made of trees, climbing up his side of the gorge wall. Reacting quickly, he shoots one, causing it to fall onto a mine. The resulting explosion takes out several others, but some creatures persist in their climb. Levi continues firing, and Drasa joins in with her machine gun. Working together, they manage to eliminate the creatures within minutes. Just as they believe it's over, a monster reaches Drasa's balcony. She fires several shots before kicking it off. More creatures begin scaling her side of the wall, forcing the two soldiers to cooperate once again to repel the attack. Another creature triggers a mine, and the explosion sends a shard of metal flying, injuring Drasa's shoulder. Undeterred, the creatures keep climbing both walls simultaneously. Levi and Drasa use their machine guns to mow them down while activating additional mines as backup. Eventually, the monsters are wiped out. By morning, Drasa tends to her wounds and tells Levi that it was the best birthday she has ever had. Levi heads down to repair the damage and replace the mines. Suddenly, a drone emerges from the gorge and flies away. In December, Levi decorates a tree in the forest with lights to simulate a Christmas tree and puts up a sign for Drasa. From then on, they begin sharing various activities, building snowmen with each other's names, playing chess, and drumming on pots. On February 14th, Levi sees Drasa crying in front of a family picture. When he asks why she skipped her patrol, she confesses that she's having a rough day and wishes he could be there with her. Determined to lift her spirits, Levi gathers tools from the armory and constructs a special contraption. He fires a rocket across the gorge, embedding it in a tree. Unfortunately, it starts a fire, but Drasa rushes to put it out and notices a rope attached to the rocket. She secures the rope to the tree and hurries back to her tower, where she finds Levi inviting her to dinner. Levi attempts to slide across the rope to reach her tower, but gets stuck midway. Fortunately, he's wearing gloves, allowing him to grip the rope and inch his way forward. Upon arrival, he presents Drasa with flowers. She immediately points out that he stinks from the exertion, prompting Levi to agree to take a shower. While he's washing, Drasa takes his uniform and replaces it with elegant clothes left by a previous occupant. During dinner, they discuss their experiences as mercenaries and the psychological toll of their profession. They share a dance, and one thing leads to another, culminating in a night of passion. The next morning, Levi begins his descent back to the tower when suddenly the hollow men appear on the wall and trigger a mine, causing a massive explosion that severs his rope. As Levi plummets, he quickly deploys his parachute. Meanwhile, Drasa sprints to the armory, grabs an assortment of weapons and a parachute, and leaps into the gorge. After free-falling for several miles, she lands in a river. Her parachute gets tangled around a rock, forcing her to cut herself free. The strong current drags her downstream, slamming her into a boulder and causing her to lose the auto-ascender. Fighting against the rushing water, she manages to grab onto some tree roots and pull herself ashore. Meanwhile, Levi is unconscious, dangling from a tree. A nearby branch suddenly shifts, revealing itself to be a monster. As it approaches Levi, he regains consciousness and immediately starts firing while untangling himself from the ropes. He drops to the ground, landing in what seems to be mud, only to realize with horror that the sticky substance is alive and moving. Panic sets in as he realizes he's landed inside the mouth of another creature. Trapped by the gooey substance as the mouth begins to close, Levi is rescued just in time by Drasa, who hears the gunshots and arrives to open fire on the beast. After cutting the substance off Levi's body with a knife, the two begin making their way toward the wall to find the rope. Suddenly, they hear screeching and see two hollow men riding horses that resemble twisted trees. The riders attack them with swords, and one dismounts to assault Drasa. She stabs it in the neck with a knife, knocking it down, then shoots it in the face. The other rider uses a whip to snatch Levi's gun, but he pulls out his second weapon and swiftly kills both the horse and its rider. Later, Drasa checks her bag and realizes the auto-ascender was lost in the river. With no way to climb the towering walls, they're stranded. She suggests following the river, reasoning that it must lead somewhere. Levi examines the creature he killed and discovers remnants of an ancient military uniform, confirming that the Hollow Men are part of the long-lost horseback battalions from legend. As they continue through the forest, they encounter hundreds of skeletons scattered along the path. Eventually, they stumble upon an abandoned town overtaken by mutated plants, with visible earthquake damage across the landscape. Hearing screeches signaling more monsters approaching, they take refuge inside a church, where they find skeletons seated on the pews. Levi catches the smell of cyanide, indicating that these individuals took their own lives, unable to endure life in this place any longer. Suddenly, a noise startles them, and Drasa looks up to see a massive spider leaping toward her. Reacting instantly, she pushes it off, falling to the ground where she spots another spider approaching. As she stabs it, 2 more spiders lunge at Levi, who swiftly shoots them down. Soon, they find themselves surrounded by even more spiders, forcing both soldiers to fire relentlessly to take down as many as possible. Drasa runs out of ammunition, prompting Levi to cover her while she reloads. They begin moving toward the door, but just then, hollow men burst in. Now, the soldiers must split their focus between shooting the spiders and battling the hollow men. Drasa slams one creature's head onto a table and throws it off, causing the spiders to swarm onto it instead. Levi also finds himself grappling with a few creatures up close, and after a fierce struggle, he manages to shoot them down. Then, Drasa fires a grenade at the back wall, creating a massive hole that allows them to escape. Levi and Drasa sprint through the forest, though they can still hear the screeches of creatures echoing in the distance. Realizing they're too exposed in the open, they decide to move closer to the wall. They discover an old door and enter, finding a facility overrun by mutated plants. Deeper inside, they learn it was once a military lab. Skeletons litter the area, and Drasa activates a generator. Levi discovers a tape, which they play on a projector. In the footage, a scientist explains that it's 1946 and that this community was established as part of a top-secret coalition of nations. During the final years of World War II, they worked on developing biochemical missiles. However, 6 days before the recording, an earthquake struck the region, causing a chemical leak. The scientists worked tirelessly to contain the toxin, which eventually merged with the DNA of the local flora and fauna, mutating them. Short-term exposure to the toxin had no immediate effects, but prolonged exposure began to alter the scientists as well. This is evidenced by the woman on the screen, who reveals branches growing from her stomach. Fortunately, since the base was located in the Gorge, the toxin never spread to the rest of humanity. In another room, Levi and Drasa find a computer from the late 2000s, indicating that people continued coming to the site to further the experiments after the initial incident. Levi powers on the computer and uncovers that this facility belongs to Darklake, a private paramilitary corporation. The drone they observed earlier was collecting samples for Darklake's experiments, which are aimed at creating super soldiers. The towers and hired guards serve to keep the operation secret. On the computer, Levi also finds an explanation for the stray dog protocol, which turns out to be a nuclear bomb designed to sterilize the area in the event of a leak. As the duo makes their way out, Levi tells Drasa that joining this mission was worth it because he got to meet her. They open the door and throw a smoke grenade before stepping outside. Suddenly, a hollow man's whip grabs Drasa's ankle and drags her away. As the rider pulls her through the forest, Drasa tries cutting the whip with her knife but accidentally crashes into a tree and drops it. She also attempts to shoot, but she can't aim properly as she keeps getting hit by rocks and logs. Levi follows the rider's tracks and eventually arrives at a facility containing the nuclear bomb. Inside, the hollow man has hung Drasa and is torturing her by twisting the branch stuck in her stomach before pulling it out. Drasa kicks him in the chest and untangles the ropes from the beam to free herself. Then, she pushes the hollow man away and grabs a piece of metal as a weapon. The hollow man continues overpowering her, and the snake in his chest tries to attack as well. However, Drasa never gives up and manages to decapitate the snake before throwing the metal at the hollow man. It doesn't cause much damage, but it angers the hollow man, who begins chasing her around the room while attacking her with his sword. Drasa uses bones as a shield and makes a torch from the bonfire, which allows her to burn her enemy. As the hollow man yells in pain, Levi finally arrives and shoots him to death. After the soldiers reunite with a hug, Levi checks the hollow man and notices the name on the uniform, recognizing it as the first guard who worked in his tower. After retrieving the creature's sword, the duo starts making their way out and finds the place where the initial leak occurred. There are mutated creatures everywhere, stuck in the goo created by the toxin. Levi and Drasa begin crossing the bridge while being creeped out by the faces breathing in the goo. Drasa accidentally steps on a root, and when she pulls at the sticky substance, the bodies start falling, attempting to capture her. Levi uses the sword to quickly cut all the roots and rescue her. Soon, Bigger creatures wake up and roar at them. As Levi continues clearing the way with the sword, a goo whip grabs his ankle and makes him fall. Drasa shoots a grenade behind them, causing a massive explosion. The creatures catch fire, and the flames spread through the entire goo structure while the duo reaches the stairs to finally escape. Afterward, they search the town and find military jeeps in a garage. They perform some maintenance on an engine and take off in one of the jeeps, driving for hours until they find the broken rope. Levi immediately ties the rope to the jeep while Drasa shoots at the hollow men trying to approach them. When she runs out of bullets, they trade places. Once the jeep is ready, they begin ascending the wall. It goes smoothly for a while, but eventually, they discover the hollow men are climbing to follow them. They kick one off, and Levi starts using the sword to kill the others. Drasa finds an axe in the toolbox and uses it to eliminate creatures too. While Levi pushes a monster against the wheels, Drasa has to strike one that lands on the front window to make it fall. Then, a hollow man leaps toward Levi, who barely manages to grab onto the jeep at the last second but ends up hanging precariously. In a quick move, he stabs the jeep's gas tank before pulling himself back up. He lights a flare and hurls it at the creatures. The flare ignites the leaking propane, triggering a massive explosion that incinerates their enemies but also causes the jeep to blow up. Levi suffers a broken leg when he is thrown against a wall, and Drasa has to help him to his feet. Since they are now closer to the top of the gorge, they decide to cut the rope, letting the jeep plummet onto the remaining hollow men below. Afterward, the two climb the rest of the way and return to Drasa's tower. While tending to their injuries, they agree to stay apart for 5 days as a quarantine precaution in case they've been infected. They also begin planning their escape together and devise a plan to destroy the gorge. They share a kiss, and Levi tells Drasa that he loves her before using a grappling gun to leap back to his own tower. The next day, during their routine radio check-in, instead of the usual operator, Bartholomew answers the call because she has discovered that the lab computer was turned on. When Levi denies entering the gorge, Bartholomew concludes that the person in the other tower must have done so, assigning Levi a new mission: to kill them. Levi pretends to accept the mission before ending the call. It is then revealed that the lab computer had a camera, and Bartholomew knows both soldiers were down there. She contacts a commander to prepare a team to visit the gorge. The following morning, while the soldiers are setting up mines for their plan, Drasa writes, "I love you" back for Levi. At that moment, they spot a helicopter approaching, prompting them to flee into the forest immediately. When the soldiers find the towers deserted, they deploy drones, initiating a chase. The drones quickly open fire, forcing Levi and Drasa to shoot back, taking them down one by one while sustaining some injuries in the process. Once they reach a high enough vantage point, they take their sniper positions and eliminate the cloaked enemies. Thanks to the mines they planted earlier, they trigger a chain reaction that begins destroying all the cloakers in the area. With the gorge now exposed, the stray dog protocol activates. Bartholomew and her team rush to the helicopter to evacuate, while Levi and Drasa run as fast as they can. The nuclear bomb detonates, creating an enormous explosion that brings down the helicopter, causing it to crash and killing everyone aboard. Unfortunately, Levi is caught in the blast and falls off the edge of a cliff into a river. Drasa manages to escape and hides in a cave, waiting for Levi. After a month with no word from him, she decides to leave alone. Some time later in France, Drasa works as a waitress. One day, she is stunned to see Levi sitting at a table. He explains that it took him time to recover from his injuries, and they reunite with a heartfelt kiss.